Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashtata Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Parivrajacharya Stotra Satri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kunidi Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Tham Ki Jai, Navadip Tham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamana Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Welcome to all, and special welcome to Brajabihari Prabhu, who's we're staying together in southern Florida. The Om Gana Timirandhasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadhati Shapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapatakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrashatam Shahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vanshakol Pitarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again, my thanks to all for coming. And let's just see one thing. Yeah, good. We've been discussing the 4 rules. What are the 4 rules you agree to follow? And we're on the 4th, illicit sex, which we've been discussing for some time. And remind me, did I talk about Prabhupada's letter to Madhusudan concerning the Garbhadhan Samskara? Did I talk about that?
I'm trying to remember if you did. I don't remember explicitly. Maybe if you read some, it would come
Okay.
back.
It's short, so I'll discuss it. Srila Prabhupada, in many places in his books, talks about the importance of the Garbhadhan Samskara. The idea is that the process of begetting a child should be purposeful, that we should try to have, bring into the world Krishna conscious children. And since the mentality of the parents at the time of conception is related to what kind of child will come, the idea is to have pure-mindedness. So for that purpose, the Garbhadhan Samskar was recommended. And at one point, one devotee gave to Madhusudan Prabhu, who was and is a householder devotee, he's my senior godbrother, some pages from Manu Samhita and describing the Garbhadhan Samskar. So he wrote to Srila Prabhupada, are we supposed to do this? Some of it, all of it, none of it? What should we do? And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's secretary, wrote back, I discussed the contents of your letter with His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada stated that our grihastas should simply chant 50 rounds before conceiving a child. Prabhupada said, we do not want all these rituals. Chanting Hare Krishna is our only business. According to the Manu Samhita, you are all mlechas and yavanas. You cannot touch the Manu Samhita, what to speak of translating it. So if you try to follow the Manu Samhita, then you become a mlecha and yavana, and your career is finished. I hope this makes the matter clear. May 19th, 1977. So that's our Garbhadhan Samskara, 50 rounds. Any questions? Okay. The next topic that on my outline is the question of birth control. Srila Prabhupada wrote to Mr. Suresh Chandra on 18 June 1973. I'm pleased to note that as of January 1st, you have given up eating of meat, fish, or eggs, as well as intoxicants and gambling. You have asked, what is meant by illicit sex? Sex should be used only in marriage for begetting nice children to raise in Krishna consciousness. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that I am sex life performed according to religious principles. Sex life for any other purpose means illicit sex. The use of contraceptive method for sex enjoyment is very sinful. Restraint in the matter of these four sinful activities is achieved by tasting the superior mellows of Krishna consciousness. You say that you are chanting 15 minutes daily from 8:15 to 8:30. Please go on and increase this chanting as much as you can, and that will help you very much in advancing in Krishna consciousness. Similarly, I'm doing a little proof texting here just to lay the groundwork for the discussion. Srimad Bhagavatam 268, purport. The spiritual values of life can be realized in the human form of material existence, and the human being must adopt family planning with reference to the context of spiritual values and not otherwise. The degraded form of family restriction by the use of contraceptives, etc., is the grossest type of material contamination. 427.6, purport. We do not find in Vedic literatures that they ever used contraceptive methods, although they were begetting hundreds of children. Checking population by contraceptive method is another sinful activity. But in this age of Kali, people have become so sinful that they do not care for the resultant reactions of their sinful lives. King Puranjana lay down with his wife Puranjani and begot a large number of children, and there is no mention in these verses that he used contraceptive methods. According to the Vedic scriptures, the contraceptive method should be restraint in sex life. It is not that one should indulge in unrestricted sex life and avoid children by using some method to check pregnancy. And then this is a lecture, July 6, 1968. The Pope says that you cannot use contraceptive method. It is sinful. But actually people are doing that because dictated by kama, lust. It is actually very sinful. It is brun hatya. I'm not sure what that word is. Anyway, hatya means killing, murder. So how you can be that happy by continually committing murders, it is not possible. Therefore, in every religion, the contraceptive method will never be supported. It is brun hatya mahapap, according to Vedic literature. Then Srila Prabhupada clarifies that. Well, first let's read another such. This is February 25th, 1974, Bombay. So every parent desires welfare of their children. So this is the greatest welfare, that this child has come in my womb. He has become my son. This is the last time. No more birth and death. He will be educated in that way. That is father's responsibility. Not that get him meat eating and not that eat him, get him meat eating and get him fat. However fat he may be, he'll die. I don't think eat him, but get him meat eating, get him fat. However fat he may be, he'll die. You cannot stop his death simply by making him fat like elephant. Therefore it is said, dharma viruddha, don't beget children if you have no responsibility. But they think, we'll have sex life, but we shall avoid this responsibility. So then, let us use contraceptives. This is greatest sinful life. Greatest sinful life. You are killing, murderer. Now in the Western countries, they are actually killing. They have made law. So if the society has become so awfully sinful, how they can expect peace and prosperity? That is not possible. That is not possible. Then March 25th, 1976, morning walk. If the child is sinful, then it will go to the womb of a mother who will kill him. That's all. By the will that he should be punished. One who has used contraceptive and abortion method, by the will of God, he will enter another mother and the mother will kill him. So one may say that this is not actually killing. Contraceptives is not murder. So Srila Prabhupada clarifies. This is 1972, December 19th. The modern contraceptive method is to destroy the favorable condition for the living entity. It is not allowed. It is not allowed means the living entity is not allowed. The living entity does not die, najayate mriyate va. Living entity has no death. But because a living entity ordained to live under certain conditions in the womb, and that is checked, that is violating the order of the Supreme. By Supreme, Daiva Netrena, by superior management, there's big management, superior management. By superior management, a living entity is put to accept a certain type of body. When it is disturbed, that means neglecting the order of the Supreme. Therefore, it is sin. The contraceptive methods adopted by the modern civilization is sinful activity because it, means the child, is not allowed to accept a certain place which was ascertained or allotted by the supreme will. Not that the living entity dies, but it is refused the place. Just like the example, one apartment is allotted to you, and if somebody does not allow you to enter that apartment, it is criminal. It is criminal, is it not, in the law? If you are allotted some, you have rented some room and you're going there, but someone comes and does not allow you, no, you cannot enter, or by force he drives you away, then it is a criminal act. There are so many subtle laws of material nature, or God, we do not know it. Therefore, we are committing simply sinful life. And sinful life means godlessness. That is also described in the Bhagavad Gita, Namam Dushkritana Mudha. All right, now we have some comments in the chat box. Going back to the letter to Madhusudan, Sankarshan says, I love this jumpy chat box. So he says, among well-reputed devotees, there's a discussion that the letter to Madhusudan was personal, and therefore the instruction of 50 rounds before trying to conceive a child isn't to be regarded as universally applicable within ISKCON. That seemed unusual that the letter was regarded in that way. Yes, especially since there's also a letter to Shamadasi, January 18th, 1969. You have asked me some questions about the functions of sex life in Krishna consciousness. And the basic principle is that it should be avoided as far as possible. However, if it is unavoidable, then it should be utilized only for begetting Krishna conscious children. In that case, the husband and wife should chant at least 50 rounds before going to sex. This instruction was very well known in ISKCON since the early days. Therefore, the expression is still current in some circles in ISKCON, 50-round kid, right? Have we heard that locution before, that phrase, 50-round kid? Yeah. So that means it's a well-known instruction. It's not a one-off to Madhusudan. It was very well known in ISKCON, in the 60s and the 70s. And if it's become now something, a special instruction to Madhusudan, that seems to be one of those, what would you say, Sakalaneha Mahata Yoga Nashta Parantapa, seems to be a wishing away of a well-known instruction. There's, a wishing away or a negligence or willing forgetfulness of Srila Prabhupada's instructions. I was reflecting today, actually, that we have this expression, keep Prabhupada in the center. And my thinking is that we do want to keep Prabhupada in the center, but sometimes it's a modulated, it's Prabhupada light that we want to keep in the center. Not the actual Prabhupada, but an imagined Prabhupada who is so much softer and more accommodating and more in tune with, well, what we want to do or what we think we should do, and not as heavy as or restrictive or what's the word, prescriptive as the Prabhupada that was in the center when he was physically present. So anyway, in regard to this, then Tulsi Priya says, what was so special about Madhusudan Prabhu that he had to chant 50 rounds and everyone else didn't? Good comment. Why wouldn't everyone else need to chant 50 rounds also? And Sankarshan says, that's why it seemed unusual to dismiss the letter in that way. Yes. So these are, and the letter from TKG to Madhusudan, Braj Bihar says, I discussed the contents of your letter with His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada stated that our grahastas should simply chant 50 rounds before conceiving a child. Srila Prabhupada said, our grahastas. That sounds general. Good point. He didn't say, dear Madhusudan, you and your wife. He said, our grahastas. And Tulsi Priya says, it's common practice now to dismiss instructions we don't like by minimizing those that come through letters to devotees. And Braj Bihar says, so that wasn't just to one person. Yeah, and well, that was just a letter that was to a particular person, where there's sort of the flag that's sometimes flown, time, place, and circumstances, time, place, and circumstances, which somehow is a mantra that's, like when we start to travel, we chant the Nrsingadev mantras so that we'll be safe. So similarly, we wave the time, place, and circumstances banner so that instructions that we don't really like so much can be relegated to a very constrained sphere. But it does appear from Tamal Krishna Maharaj's letter to Madhusudan, from Prabhupada's letter to Shamadasi, that this was the standard. Forget the Garbhadhan Samskara, that's not required. But how many times does Prabhupada mention the Garbhadhan Samskara in his books? Again and again and again and again. So here he clarifies Garbhadhan Samskara for you mlechas and yavanas means chant 50 rounds. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And we might also say, if one is serious about getting, children are such a thing. You have sex for a few minutes, but you have the child for his whole life. Why wouldn't you want to chant 50 rounds? Why wouldn't you want to give the child the best opportunity to become Krishna conscious? Or why wouldn't you want to invite a child who would have the best opportunity for becoming advanced in Krishna consciousness? Why would you want to have some other kind of consciousness as the prevailing mentality at the time of conception, when this offer is there? The chant 50 rounds, purify your consciousness, and have, as Prabhupada said, good children. We're throwing away Manu Sangita because we're mlechas and yavanas, but it doesn't mean that we're meant to throw away the whole story. Well, then just have sex and whatever comes. Whatever kind of child comes, that's okay. Why would we not want to be deliberate and so on? Everything else we plan. We plan our business, we plan our expenses, we plan our daily schedule, we plan our college education, for children, we plan so many other things. But sex, we're not going to make a deliberate plan. That doesn't sound smart to me. Apart from, it doesn't sound like what Prabhupada instructed. Tulsi Priya says another way of getting rid of instructions is to refer to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is seemingly more liberal. Yeah, in the law they call this, what is it? Judge shopping, is that what they call it? Yeah, something like that, where you're shopping around for the court where you think you can get the best decision. So these things are going on, as Srila Prabhupada said. There's a comment from Praveen, just to me. Praveen, by the way, you can send your comments to everyone if they're not really meant for me. Any discussion apart from, I've talked a lot so far.
I was just reading something in the very beginning of the 4th canto where the description of the Prajapatis is going on. And there was a verse I was reading that Prajapati Ruchi, who had as his son the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the Sanskrit, it uses the word samadhina in reference to his begetting such a child. And he's described as a Brahma Varchishva, very powerful Brahmana. And I was thinking along the lines of what you were just saying, that everything is based on intention. And his intention was to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, which required him to be very meditative at the time of conception. And like you say, why wouldn't people want to have the very best life for themselves and their children they possibly could, especially since they've been handed this great opportunity?
Yeah. I happened to see an item some years ago, I think. There are those 2 tennis girls, the sisters, who were like the all-star tennis champions these days, I think. And it seems that their father deliberately, yes, thank you, Venus and Serena Williams. It seems that their father deliberately wanted to have tennis champions as his children. He had that in mind at the time of conceiving these 2 girls. And there it is. So you can take this as anecdotal evidence that what you're thinking of may influence what you get. So, and of course, Prabhupada said the modern population is cats and dogs. So, yes, why would we not want to get, and Prabhupada says this elsewhere, that it's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, I think, where Arjuna is arguing that we're going to, the women will become polluted and so on. And Prabhupada makes the point that the whole Vedic civilization depends on good mothers and good children. Good mothers and good children, begetting a high quality population that's eligible for participating in a civilization of God consciousness. So why would our society not want to do that? Or taking it another way, what a great responsibility lies with the grihastas. This is not the business of the sannyasis or the brahmacharis or the vanaprasthas. but this is a main responsibility of the grihastas to have children. What is that? Putrahinam griha shunyam. The Chanakya Pandit indicates that the purpose of householder life is to have good children. So that responsibility lies with the householders. And why, and therefore one would think that the householders should do everything they can to ensure that they'll have the best possible children, so that those children can serve in Krishna consciousness and be a credit to their families, or as in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, bring the parents back to Godhead, and finally themselves go back to Godhead. Why would we not want that? So that's, and then Dharma Viruddha Bhuteshu Kamosmi. Krishna says, that sex life I am. That sex life represents me. It's devotional service to bring into this world a child meant for going back home, back to Godhead. Something else. Let's see. There's the chat box is there. Yeah. There was a question from Tulsi Priya. Yes.
Yes, Maharaj. I'm going to ask a strange question, and I'm a little bit embarrassed, so I'm going to keep my camera off. Years ago, in my studying of herbalism and stuff like that, there was a book on women's sexual health, and the same author wrote another book, which I never read, but the title of it stayed in my head, and it was called Conscious Conception. And then that idea had stayed in my head for a number of years. This is all prior to joining ISKCON. And then after I joined ISKCON, I was, you hear about the Garbhadana Samskara, you hear about chanting 50 rounds. And so my embarrassing idea is I thought that wouldn't that be a kind of interesting bridge preaching, that because nowadays people are so very concerned about fertility, people have so much difficulty conceiving, people who want to have children, that's often the case. And I thought it would be an interesting sort of bridge preaching to reach out to people who want to have children and suggest, oh, you can have a spiritual baby, and you sort of guide them through it, and get them to chant japa and be vegetarian and take only prasadam. And I don't know, I was just wondering if you thought that was a crazy idea or not, and maybe somebody who's more qualified than I am, since I'm not a mother, might want to take it up, because we have the yoga preaching and we have so many different kinds of bridge preaching, and I just thought it would be an interesting way to introduce people to Krishna consciousness. Or do you think this idea is only suitable for people who are actually practicing it?
Well, I think first of all, we should practice this bridge preaching to our own members.
Mm-hmm.
Who, get them on the closer side of the bridge. I might observe that on the Grihastha Vision Team website, there's sort of a discussion, perhaps you've read it, that speaks of different levels of following this regulative principle. And it says that those who follow the strictest principle are certainly praiseworthy, but they're rare. And further, then it seems that more people are on the level of 3.5 rules, or following the less strict principle, as it's sometimes called. So if that's so, that the majority of householders are not following the guideline or the direction to have sex only for children, only once a month for having children, then why are we not seeing so many, a proportionately large number of big families in Krishna consciousness? The Catholics have historically large families because they don't, because the Pope has been the Vatican speaks against birth control, or speaks against contraceptives other than contraception by kind of restraint. And so there, Catholic families are typically have been large. So how is it that the norm in Krishna consciousness the two norms in Krishna consciousness are A, the less strict principle, and B, small families? It would appear that either devotees are what's the word, abnormally impotent or infertile, or that that is due to contraceptives. That's what we would have to think. I suppose that's a, but I think I strayed apart from your point. Yes, it's something that, bridge preaching, or call it this, call it that, but this is what we have to offer to the world, a different way of life in which we don't smoke or take other intoxicants, in which we don't gamble, in which we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs, in which we don't have illicit sex, and in which we do have children. We have we're the yoga, bhakti yoga is the yoga that allows sex life, but for having Krishna conscious children. That means that there's a purpose to sex. For the women who are outspoken, as many are, on this point, non-Krishna conscious women, that why should the woman just be an object, right? Why should women just be objectivized and used as things for sense gratification? They don't use sense gratification as their term, as things for the sexual enjoyment of men. We agree. As Prabhupada wrote also to Madhusudan, that your wife is not a machine for sense gratification. So this should be a welcome message for those who don't want, for women who don't want to be machines, and for men who want to have a higher vision of their wives than just seeing them as playthings or tools or living sex toys. We offer a higher vision of family life. We offer a higher vision, a spiritual, genuine, authentic vision of spiritual life. I remember before I came to the Association of Devotees, I read an article about Srila Prabhupada and his ashram at 26 Second Avenue, and it sounded terribly austere, but it sounded authentic. It sounded authentic, and so I was attracted. In contradistinction to various movements or methods where, it's kind of loose and, so it's like an add-on to your normal material life. I could see that Prabhupada was teaching a whole serious method for spiritual progress. So that's what we are. Prabhupada said we're not for, if you sell costume jewelry, you get a lot of customers, but we're not in that business. We're in the diamond business. So if there's fewer customers, we don't mind, but we're not going to switch to costume jewelry because it sells more. So yes, there is, I think, a place for this, or it seems appropriate that yes, if you'd like to learn how sex can have a place within yoga, we're the people who tell you. And we're not going to BS you. We're not going to tell you something that just because you want to hear it and because you'll like us or pay us money or think that we're great. We're going to tell you what the real story is. And as Prabhupada said, and if you're sincere, you will take it. If you're sincere, you will take it.
And Maharaj?
Yes.
It seems that even if you just present the information, if people don't take it up fully, you've at least presented the information and their consciousness is somewhat elevated. And hopefully if they even try to practice some of it, they might wind up having children that may be more inclined to spiritual life, would you say?
Well, you know, just to put it out there and then people hear it and don't really do it. I don't know how much that helps them.
Well, I mean, they may not take fully to the process, but maybe they would try it just for the, if you're focusing on one small aspect of it and they say, okay, I'll try it, but it doesn't,
whatever people take away from Krishna consciousness will help them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they get from it will help them. But best thing is take it. Even if, like we say, no intoxication. A person who hears that and doesn't really follow it, but at least now he knows, he's better off. But the real thing is that that's not why we teach that. We teach it so that people will do it. They'll say yes. Why am I taking drugs or coffee or cigarettes or tea? These things are just getting in my way. And there are those who say, well, I couldn't give up tea, or I couldn't give up LSD, or I couldn't give up this. And well, okay, tough beans. But you can't have everything. You have a choice. Would you rather have LSD or go back to Godhead? Would you rather have coffee and tea or go back to Godhead? Would you rather have, this or that or the other thing, or actually practice yoga according to the authentic principles? It's your choice. But we're not going to, just, or I don't see why we should just cozy up to you and say, well, whatever you think, here's what it is. And as Prabhupada said, if you're sincere, you'll take it, or at least you'll try to take it. And if you try, you may succeed. And it becomes perhaps known that, wow, these Hare Krishnas are really, wow, it's kind of too much. But after a while, what happens? It becomes like the standard. I remember, back when I joined, vegetarian? How do you get protein? How do you live? And now it's like, everybody, it's like so out of vogue to be a meat eater, practically speaking. Everybody says, yeah, I've given up red meat, or I've given up this, I've given up that, or I don't eat this, or I don't eat that. People are seeing, and if you're vegetarian, now you're looked up to. Prabhupada said no cigarettes, Now that's like, if you're a smoker, they put you in a glass cage in the airport, along with the other baboons and similar creatures. So our principles are gradually being recognized by the more intelligent people as good principles, as principles they would at least aspire to follow. And if they can't follow them, they would at least admire. So these are our principles. That's my pitch here, is that, well, we may do whatever we may do according to the directions of one's own spiritual master and the particular personal circumstances. But our basic principle is this: no illicit sex, no contraceptives, sex for having Krishna conscious children only. That's our deal. And if you're looking for the real deal, here it is. If you want something else, there's lots of yoga societies around. But though, if you're a diamond customer, our doors are open. If you want something else, go down the street. They're selling, costume jewelry by the bushel. Let's see.
Thank you.
There's some other comments, and then I'm going to come back to some of the other ones. It's also a wonderful yagya, the chanting of 15 rounds. Instead of chanting for 2 hours or so, we're chanting for about 8 hours. It changes the consciousness, which is what is needed in order to request the conception of an elevated soul. I've been a brahmachari and sannyasi, but I remember the first time I chanted 64 rounds, for other purposes, obviously, but wow, it's different. It's different. Chanting Hare Krishna makes a big difference, and chanting Hare Krishna a lot makes a lot of difference. Good point, Panchatattva. The authentic principles of the Jnana and Dhyana schools, as Srila Prabhupada says in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, don't allow any sex at all for any reason, period. Yeah. So where the liberal guys really on the authentic yoga scene, we say, yes, you can have sex, but then what is it? Well, let's get down to it. Having sex means there'll be a result. If you don't get in the way, if you don't interfere artificially, there'll be a result. There'll be a child. Now, what kind of child do you want to have? Or do you prefer, artificially interfering with nature's arrangements? That's another whole nother story. There was a question by Praveen. Let me come back to it. It was way up there. There's a common argument: how to maintain so many children. It is a financial burden. What is the alternative if one cannot control sex desire and also does not want children? There is no alternative. We don't offer an alternative that you want sex and you don't want children, so here's what we recommend. I don't know of an alternative that Prabhupada recommended. Well, children are too expensive, so could you please recommend a way that we can have sex, because we have to have sex, but without children? There is no, Prabhupada's not offering an alternative. He says it's the alternative, Prabhupada says, is degradation. The obvious way to avoid the financial burden is by contraceptives, and Prabhupada says that's degraded and sinful. And if we're sinful, how do we expect that to go back to Godhead? How do we expect to go back to Godhead? And what kind of children do we expect to have when we have them anyway?
Maharaj?
Yes.
What I see when you talk about, there's this phrase, and I'm not,
Excuse me, could you just hold that for a minute, Tulsi?
Sure.
Because another thought came to mind. Think about that before you get into the whole business. Children are expensive. Wives are expensive. Family life is expensive. Maybe you don't want, maybe this is not a party you want to go to. If you're looking at it in terms of the financial burden and the return on investment, maybe you say, as Hayagriva said, better to skip the whole thing. And Prabhupada said, yes. Rajasastu palam dukkam, the result of passion is unhappiness. How happy is it to work all day? How happy is it to have so many burdens? So thinking of it from that point of view and looking ahead, you may say, forget it. I'd rather just not, easier to give up sex than to undergo all this trouble. Prabhupada therefore said, that's the best thing. No sex. Best thing is no sex. Then no expenditure, no trouble, nothing to give up. But all right, if we want to have sex, all right, there's not only permission, but Krishna says, yes, you can do this in such a way that I will be there. Dharma viruddha bhuteshu, by following these regular principles. But I remember attending or hearing a speaker from TM, and the guy was kind of offering that, you'll get better, you'll do better in your studies, you'll get along better with people, you'll have a better family life, and at the end you'll enter the universal conscious field, or whatever they called it. Basically, by our buy our detergent and we'll do everything. You know, just add our magic powder and then do whatever you want and it'll all be great. So we're not for that. We're not cheating people that you just, you know, just give us some money and chant a mantra for 5 minutes in the morning and evening and everything will be swell. If you're serious about the ultimate purpose of life, that's what we're talking about. After millions and millions and millions of lifetimes, now we have the human form of life. What is that? Sudurlabam ante. I've forgotten the word. The verse. Prabhupada quotes it a lot.
Is it Durlabam Manusham Janma?
No. Sudurlabam ante. That one should try for that goal, which is not having attained the human form of life after many, many births. One should try for that destination or that result, which is not available anywhere within the three worlds. Labdva, that's the beginning. Labdva, something, Sudurlabam. Anyway, Prabin will find it, I'm confident. That's our. Yes, please. Again.
Labdva sudurlabhamidam.
Labdva sudurlabhamidam janmamante. After so many births, now we have this human form of life. So it should be used for this exclusive purpose, for this rare opportunity of attaining perfection. So how do you do that? Well, this Srila Prabhupada is telling us how to do that. Tulsi Priya, I interrupted you.
Oh, it's okay. I guess what I'm trying to figure out, there's a phrase called, it goes, defining deviancy down. And defining deviancy down, I'll send you an article. It was a paper written by Daniel Patrick Moynihan many years ago. Mm-hmm. And I have not read the paper. I've read comments on it, but it just seems that the idea is that, you know, we start off with a certain standard, and then because of whatever reason, I think Daniel Patrick Moynihan talks about the ability of a community to deal with the deviancy from the norm. And I don't mean that in a moralistic sense. I mean, there's just norms and people don't follow them. And so a community may become overwhelmed by the ability to deal with those deviancies. And so they keep lowering their standards. But then the phenomenon is that people, because people being people, they're going to deviate from whatever norm there is. So if you keep defining it down, then the deviancy becomes lower and lower. So my question is why do we define the deviancy down? And again, I'm not trying to be moralistic about it, but there's a standard for illicit sex and it's getting defined down. But then once you define it down, somebody's going to deviate from that. Mm-hmm. And I guess the other expression is slippery slope. So I still would like to know why. If you don't follow, you don't follow, fine, you know, but why define it lower? You know, what's to be gained from that? Except, you know, people don't follow.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, it's okay.
Srila Prabhupada quoted one of his professors at Scottish Churches College, I think it was, or perhaps it was earlier, that if you try for an A, you may get a B. If you try for a B, you may get a C. So reinforcing what you say. Of course, we define it down because we don't like the idea that we're not to the standard. So rather than change our lives, which we, for one reason or other, are unwilling or we say unable to do, so we change the standard. And then we say, well, I don't follow the strict standard, but I follow, you know, and then we make what we follow normative. And then we feel better about ourselves. But, you know, I'm doing something sinful. Specifically, contraceptives, Prabhupada says, greatly sinful, but it's normal.
But it's not just the people who aren't following; it's people maybe are following, and they're saying, well, if you can't do it,
I
then
see,
follow
yeah.
the, you know?
Well, of course, I don't want to totally bash on people who are who see things a different way, but this is my understanding. This is what my understanding of what Prabhupada's saying. And I see that a lot of just the, what I'm quoting is sort of brushed off to the side or forgotten. So, yeah, as stated in my original disclaimer, I don't want to bash people's spiritual guides who are saying something else that may be tailored to a particular circumstance. But in principle, at least, what are our principles? Let's get that first before we say, well, we have to adjust this for this person or that person, or you have to look at it this way or that way. Let's get it down first. What we're taught. What are the 4 rules? What are
I'm
the
sorry,
4 rules?
but my question remains, why do you think that those norms get defined downwards? Are leaders afraid of people leaving, or what?
I don't want us to psych out our leaders. I think certainly things get defined down for the practitioners because they say, well, if I only have to do 5 push-ups a day instead of 10, great, I get off easy. If I only have to study for 1 hour instead of 3, everybody would like to take the easy way out. So that's simple enough. Sharanagati finds it interesting that for each of the 4 pillars of sinful life, there are organizations among the non-devotees. Gamblers Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Weight Watchers, sex addicts, and so on. Yeah, Sexaholics Anonymous. Good observation. Sankarshan says, late marriages and financial struggles seem to be a cause of small families in ISKCON. Also, the early years of ISKCON weren't aimed at creating grahastas with secure and lucrative careers. Nowadays, people rarely join temples like before, and those who are interested are more grounded in developing careers. So maybe bigger families will increase in the future. Well, okay, you have a sort of a more charitable view that really people are following these 4 regulative principles strictly, and therefore they say, well, because I can't afford another kid, I'm not going to have sex. That may be what it's about. But I'm going on what I'm hearing from the Grahasta Vision team and from, well, many devotees who are, sort of counseling people, and they say, no, people are having sex. People are having sex. And it's what would you say? That they're abstaining from sex because they don't want children is rare, or is the exception. And what's generally going on is that people are having sex because of this and because of that. Then it follows that there should be large families. And if there aren't, it follows that contraceptives are being used. That's my logic. I'm not going on, it would be interesting to have real data, properly conducted surveys that would give us the facts. But my guess is, my educated guess from the data that, the anecdotal data that I'm getting, is that people are having sex, but without following the 4 regulative principles. And yes, because it's a financial burden, it's a this burden, it's a that burden. So we do want sex, we don't want children, therefore contraceptives. Or not that we do want sex, we don't want children, and so if we have to choose, we won't have sex. No, we want it all. Braj Bihari has commented humorously above, husbands can also be expensive. Yes. Married life is expensive. Yes, tasyaiva hetu prayateta covido, right? Venkatesh quotes. Yes, the same point. And Prabhin is quoted, Labdva sudurlam idam bahusam bhavante manusham artadam anityam api hadhira turnam yateta napated anumritya yavan nishreyasasya nishreyasaya vishaya kalu sarvatasyat. After many, many births and deaths, one achieves the rare human form of life, which, although temporary, affords one the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. Thus, a sober human being should quickly endeavor for the ultimate perfection of life, as long as his body, always subject to death, has not fallen down and died. After all, sense gratification is available even in the most abominable species of life, whereas Krishna consciousness is possible only for a human being. We're coming to the end of our time. Let's see what we have. Just a couple things more in the chat. Let's see if we can dispose of them, not dispose of them, note them and appreciate them quickly. With new persons, Panchatattva says, isn't there room for engaging people in Krishna conscious activities while not presenting the rules in a way that may seem too formidable to them to comply with? Yeah, I think we don't, as I mentioned in a previous thing, it's not like someone walks in the door, we say, welcome, we're so glad you came. Now, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no meat eating, and welcome to the kirtan. You know, sit down, chant Hare Krishna, and so on. But once we start speaking, we find that back in 1966, 68, Prabhupada is explaining these things for those who, want to come forward. The first thing is just to attract people. Come on, take to this. Then when they come forward and say, well, take to this, what do I have to do? Then the next stage comes to train them. And these are the instructions Prabhupada gave. So I think your point is legitimate. Braj Bihari says, regarding Tulsi Priya's question, here's what I hear. Sometimes it's faith in the power of devotional service. So leaders sometimes tell devotees to just keep doing service and get purified in that way with faith, that by that purification, they can come to the right standard. And then he cites 11, 20, 27, and 28, which I want to focus on in a future class. I think that's a fair statement from Braj Bihari Prabhu, that, it's not that our leaders are looking to kind of give people an out. We all want people to come to the real thing. And then it's a question of, well, how do we do it? Even if we know they're smoking, they're drinking, they're eating meat, they're having illicit sex, they're gambling, whatever. So we think, well, let's get them into the association of devotees. Let's get them performing devotional service. Let's get them chanting. Let's get them doing something. And then we'll work on the hard parts, as it were. I think that's, and the things that they do will help them come to the hard parts, deal with the hard parts. I think that's quite a fair assessment. Nice that Tukahantri has joined. Yes, I noticed that and meant to say something. We're so happy to see even your name, Tukahantri. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you're feeling halfway decent at least. I hope you're feeling better and making progress. We're really glad that you've come. Tulsi Priya says, not having sex is also being blamed for marital problems among devotees. Hold that and bring that up again next time, because I have something to say about that that might be interesting. And again, I don't have to be the only person around here who talks. And somehow the chat box has become the way to go. It was fun kind of when people were speaking out also personally. So I'm open to both. And the way we do things is that we try to stop on time. So I'm going to try to stop not too much after time. We do have more material, including some more things about different other things that are going on in the world of illicit sex. I have a whole section on what are the things that we can do if we're following 3.5 regulative principles and we sincerely want to come to 4. What's the step-by-step? What are the practical things we can do? And also Braj Bihari's very valuable verse from the 11th canto that deserves discussion. So in short, we're not done yet. So welcome back next Thursday, and we'll continue this discussion. And we welcome everyone's participation. Thank you so very much. And Tuaco is having their program they've just started, and feel free to tune in over there. Thank you again. Hare Krishna.
Jai Jai.
Stay safe.
Hi, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you.
Very well.
Hare
Hari Hari.